Welcome back to boot camp, everyone. This is Cliff. I've decided to finally get back to finishing off this series. It's been kind of hanging around at the back of my brain, bugging me while I've been busy doing other things. In this session, I want to discuss some of the environmental conditions that can affect combat. There are about 8 different ones. In Volume 1, there was really only 2. It was either going to be, well, I think there was only one actually. I think it was just nighttime. In Volume 1, it was only nighttime that really affected anything. But in Volume 2, we've picked up all sorts of weather. We've got rain and heavy rain, snow and deep snow. The rain can lead to mud. And then there's mists and fogs that can also affect things. These can affect 4 different aspects of gameplay. One is, these can affect the maximum line of sight possible for your scenario. These include night, heavy rain, mist, and fog. All of those can affect the maximum line of sight in different ways. They can impact your ability to spot characters. Nighttime affects spotting, as does snow and deep snow if winter camouflage is in place. They can also impact firing your weapon skill. That can be impacted by night, rain, heavy rain, mist, and fog. And finally, your ability to move. The speed at which you can move can be impacted by things like mud and snow and deep snow. And vehicles can be impacted too by those, as well as mist and fog. Mist and fog affect vehicular motion, but not vehicular motion, but not motion by men per se. I've made up a little cheat sheet to help for those of you who are playing over the board. If you're playing with Vassal, Greg Amos has included a nice little tray here on the map that contain all of these markers to keep track of them. So we got clear, and then you've got rain, heavy rain, mist, and fog for your environmentals. The ground conditions can be firm, which is normal, clear. It can be mud, snow, or deep snow, back to clear. And then it can either be day or it can be night. Yeah, it's cutting a little bit on those. And on these markers, Greg has put all of the information you need. I've made up a similar set. I'm going to put this PDF in the files section, where these are like 2.5 by 2.5 inches. So you can see that nighttime is a -2 to spot any opposing characters that have a sneak or a hide order. It's harder to see them at night. You get -2 weapon skill to all shots at greater than 2 hexes. 2 hexes and less is unaffected. You get 1d3 plus 1 flares. We'll talk about flares in a moment. So you get between 2 and 4 flares to help you out trying to spot those enemies. And at nighttime, if it isn't, your LOS is limited to 1d6 plus 2, so somewhere between 3 and 8 hexes is as far as you're going to be able to see at all. Mud primarily affects motion. No sprinting when there's mud, and no fast vehicular motion. If you have a wheeled vehicle, a jeep or a truck, and you get off the roads, there's a chance you're going to get stuck, mired in the mud. You just have to roll a d10 for every hex you enter. If you get an 8 or a 9, you're mired, and your driver's going to have to get unstuck. Snow, no sprinting, just like mud. No fast vehicles, just like mud. You don't have to worry about getting mired in snow. There's a spotting -1 if winter camouflage is available for your opposing sides. Deep snow, same thing but worse. Now no sprinting, evade, or run and gun. You're down to just sneaking around through the deep snow. No fast or forward vehicular motion, and -1 to spot again for winter camo. I almost feel like there ought to have been something like mud where you could get stuck in the snow with the vehicles. A wheeled vehicle in deep snow off-road ought to likely get stuck. Not quite the same thing as being mired, but that's neither here nor there. It's not in the game. I just think it ought to be. Rain and heavy rain. Rain is -1 weapon skill to all shots more than 2 hexes, as well as heavy rain -1 weapon skill to everything over 2 hexes. Heavy rain limits LOS. Regular rain doesn't. Heavy rain, max LOS, 2d6s, so somewhere between 2 and 12 hexes. And with heavy rain, at the end of every turn, you have to roll a d10. If you roll a 9, which I often roll 9s if you've ever watched me, that causes mud if mud's not already in play. So even if you don't start muddy, it can get muddy if it's heavy rain. Last two, mist and fog. Mist, it's like a lighter than rain. No fast vehicular motion. It doesn't impact soldiers at all. -1 weapon skill again, just like rain. And the max LOS here with the mist is 1d6 plus 4, so somewhere between 5 and 10 hexes. Fog is thicker. No fast or forward vehicular motion. -2 weapon skill to greater than 2 hexes. And the max LOS is 1d6. Now, in the rules it says if you go for mist, there's a chance it might turn into fog later because of an event. If you rolled like a 3 on your d6, that means max LOS is 7. Let's say you roll a 1, so max LOS is now 5 for mist. 1 plus 4 is 5. Then you go to fog conditions, you have to roll for max LOS, and you roll a 6. Well, it was a 5 and now you got 6. Fog is not going to become better visibility than mist. What you do is you take the 5 from your mist and you subtract 1 to make it 4. So you don't go up when you go from mist to fog. You always go down at least 1. And if you rolled lower, so if you rolled a 1 plus 4 is 5, and then on fog you rolled a 1, it would become 1. Just saying. So I will post this for your amusement. Now out here on the board, let's go down a little bit now. Well, let's go back up again. Get down, get back up again. Okay, let's say it's night. These things can stack. So if it's night, heavy rain and mud, which I often end up fighting in when I'm in Normandy for some reason. It always just ends up being there, it seems. Come back here. Behave. Center yourself. Must be OCD. Alright. These things stack so that heavy rain, our max LOS is 2d6, so 1, 3, that's 4 for heavy rain, and then nighttime max LOS is 1d6 plus 2. I roll a 5, 7. So night would be 7, heavy rain would be 4, so our visibility for this one would be 4. Up here we have visibility at the top, and I can set that to 4. I have our wind going at direction 3 for now. Just for illustration purposes, you would roll for that. So out here, I've got Sergeant Taylor in a tree, and I've got Overshoots Gruber out here by the rocks. Our LOS, max LOS is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have no LOS to each other. In the dark and the rain, they can't see each other. Even though there's nothing blocking at LOS, our max range for LOS is longer. So let's move them up so we can see. We said it was 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's put Gruber here so that he now is within LOS of Taylor. Let's say they're both spotted for grins. Flares, how do flares work? If we're nighttime, we want to illuminate. You're given a certain number of flares, a D3 plus 1. Let's say that Taylor has a flare. If you want to fire a flare, here's how they work. Taylor must be given an aim fire order. That's the only way you can fire a flare. A person who has a flare and an aim fire order on the firing impulse, either 2 or 4, may, instead of firing his weapon, fire the flare into the air. The flare is placed 3 hexes away from the firing soldier. Your choice. So he's going to try to, with the wind, get it upwind of Gruber. Yeah, Gruber. So I'm going to throw it up here, 1, 2, 3 here, into 1308. Just because he threw it there doesn't mean it ends up there. He's fired his star shell. And now we have to roll for scatter, a d6 for direction. It's going direction 4 down. Trouble. And the extent is a d6 minus 2 usually. 2 minus 2 is 0. So it goes down 2 and then back up 2. It ended up in the hex where I threw it, and it illuminates immediately. The nice thing about working in Vassal is that I can show that illuminated area, and there's everybody who's illuminated, and look at that, we're both illuminated. Once you fire a flare, you get a duck back. Now everything within this illuminated area no longer suffers the penalty for the heavy or for the nighttime conditions. So the spotting penalty is gone, that -2 to spot with sneak or hide, that's gone. And the -2 to hit, the -2 weapon skill, that's gone. However, a flare does nothing for the heavy rain. The heavy rain still has a -1 weapon skill for more than 2 away. So that if we were to fire Taylor at Gruber, there would still be a -1 for the rain. But if Gruber was here, we would have a -1 for the rain, and we would have -2 for the dark, because they're greater than 2. That's 3 hexes apart. So the firing here would be his 7, -3, which would be 4, +1 for distance is 5, and then whatever his order was in the open. Playing on the board, you have to constantly be measuring from the flare to see which hexes are illuminated, and the flare is going to drift at the end of each turn. So let's say it's the end of the turn now. You do your end of the turn grenade resolution, your end of the turn rally checks, end of the turn medical aid checks, all that kind of stuff. Then you have to check to see what happens to the flare. You roll a d10. On an 8 or a 9, it winks out. We roll a 1. Since it didn't wink out, it travels 1 hex in the direction of the wind to there. And next turn, you'd roll another d10 at the end, a 3, and it goes to there. And you just see your illumination moving along down wind. Flares have a nasty tendency of popping back toward the throwing side and illuminating your own positions when you don't want them to. But they can be handy at times to illuminate a kill zone If you can hang outside of the illuminated area, you maintain the -2 for the darkness, whereas your opponent loses that darkness cover because they're being illuminated by the star shell. It can be a good thing. It's a two-sided sword. Those are the basics. The basics. If you got mud, you can only evade, and vehicles can only go forward. They can't go fast. Generally speaking, I most of the time just crawl my vehicles anyway, because I like to keep them close to my soldiers and not outpace them too much. So that's not a big deal, but mud is bad for Jeeps because you can get mired out in the field, and that's annoying. So when there's mud, I tend to keep my vehicles on the road, at least the wheeled vehicles, on the roads. I think that is it for the environmental effects. If you guys have specific subjects you would like me to cover in this series of boot camp videos, let me know. I'm going to get back to work on these things. I'm probably going to be modifying my table of contents a little bit because I have different ideas now than when I last looked at it. And I will see you next time. Later.